The scramble that produced the Berlin Conference's division of Africa is beginning again, this time above the Arctic Circle, with nuclear powers, with international law, and with climate change creating the opportunity faster than any diplomatic framework can manage. 13% of the world's undiscovered oil, 30% of undiscovered gas. The world's most significant new shipping route, rare earth minerals powering the energy transition. 8 nations with Arctic coastlines. China, not an Arctic nation, declaring itself a near-Arctic state. The Arctic is the next great geopolitical prize. The race has already begun. Russia operates approximately 40 icebreakers, including the world's only nuclear-powered icebreaker fleet, capable of maintaining Arctic routes year-round, regardless of ice conditions. The United States operates one operational heavy icebreaker, the USCGC Healy, commissioned in 2000. Canada, with the world's second-longest Arctic coastline, has no nuclear icebreakers and a fleet of aging conventional vessels. China, not an Arctic nation, operates 4 icebreakers and is building more. Norway and Finland have significant Arctic expertise and relatively modern fleets. The specific infrastructure gap is not a future problem. It is a present reality that determines who can operate in the Arctic, who can enforce territorial claims, and who controls the shipping routes that climate change is opening. The United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS, is the primary legal framework governing Arctic territorial claims. Under UNCLOS, coastal states have a 200 nautical mile exclusive economic zone from their coastlines, plus potential extended continental shelf claims up to 350 nautical miles, where the continental shelf can be demonstrated to extend beyond the 200-mile limit. The Arctic-specific legal complexity, the Lomonosov Ridge, an underwater mountain range running across the Arctic Ocean from Russia's side to Canada and Greenland, may constitute a continental shelf extension that gives Russia, Canada, and Denmark overlapping claims to the central Arctic Ocean seabed. All 3 have filed competing continental shelf claims with the UN Commission on the limits of the continental shelf. None has been fully resolved. The United States has never ratified UNCLOS, making it the only major maritime power outside the treaty framework. The specific consequence: America cannot formally assert extended continental shelf claims under the treaty's provisions, cannot participate in UNCLOS dispute resolution mechanisms, and cannot fully leverage the treaty's protections for American Arctic interests. The U.S. Senate has repeatedly refused to ratify UNCLOS, primarily due to concerns about surrendering sovereignty to international legal processes. The result: America has the second largest Arctic coastline of any nation, significant Arctic interests, and no formal legal standing in the treaty framework that governs them. American diplomats and military officials have consistently described the failure to ratify UNCLOS as one of the most consequential self-inflicted strategic wounds in American foreign policy. Russia's Arctic strategy is the most comprehensively developed of any Arctic nation. Built over decades of Soviet-era infrastructure and significantly expanded since 2014. Russia has approximately 53,000 kilometers of Arctic coastline, more than any other country. It operates the Northern Sea Route as a commercial shipping lane with mandatory icebreaker escort requirements that generate revenue and reinforce Russian sovereignty over the route. It maintains military bases across the Arctic that were reactivated and expanded after 2014, including on the Franz Josef Land Archipelago, the New Siberian Islands, and Wrangel Island. Russia's Arctic strategy is simultaneously economic, the Northern Sea Route's commercial potential, and military, Arctic submarines and missile systems that give Russia a strategic deterrent capability unreachable from NATO's conventional forces. The Northern Sea Route's commercial potential is Russia's most consequential Arctic economic asset. The route runs from Murmansk along Russia's Arctic coast to the Bering Strait, approximately 600 kilometers. It reduces Asia-Europe shipping distances by approximately 40% compared to the Suez Canal, cutting voyage times by 10 to 15 days and fuel costs proportionally. In years when the route is navigable for longer periods, its commercial attractiveness increases. Russia charges transit fees and requires icebreaker escort for vessels using the route, generating revenue and asserting sovereignty simultaneously. Transit volume has been increasing, approximately 35 million tons in 2022. Russia's stated goal: make the Northern Sea Route a global shipping alternative to the Suez Canal by 2030. China's Arctic strategy is the most unexpected element of the Arctic competition, and the one that most alarmed existing Arctic nations when it became fully visible. China is not an Arctic nation. Its nearest territory is approximately 1,500 kilometers from the Arctic Circle. In 2018, China published its Arctic Policy White Paper, the first by any non-Arctic nation, in which it described itself as a near-Arctic state and announced a polar Silk Road connecting the Belt and Road Initiative to Arctic shipping routes. China has invested in Arctic scientific research stations in Norway's Svalbard archipelago, has sought investment opportunities in Arctic infrastructure across Greenland, Canada, and Iceland, and has negotiated Arctic shipping agreements with Russia. The near-Arctic state designation has no basis in international law. China made it up, and it has been acting on it with the systematic investment pace of a country that has decided the Arctic is the next strategic theater. China's specific Greenland strategy is the most consequential expression of its Arctic ambitions, and the one that most directly triggered American counter-responses. Greenland contains significant rare earth mineral deposits, potential oil and gas resources, and a geographic position that makes it strategically central to Arctic shipping routes and military surveillance. China has attempted multiple investments in Greenland's mining sector, an airport construction project, and a naval facility proposal, all of which were blocked by American diplomatic pressure on Denmark. President Trump's 2019 proposal to purchase Greenland, which Denmark rejected, was directly motivated by specific American intelligence assessments about Chinese investment interest. Greenland's population of approximately 56.0 is navigating competing offers from Denmark, America, and China, while pursuing its own path toward greater autonomy from Danish administration. The Ukraine war's most consequential Arctic impact has been the militarization of the High North to a degree not seen since the Cold War. Finland and Sweden's NATO accession, Finland joining in April 2023, Sweden in March 2024, transformed the Arctic security architecture. Finland shares a 340-kilometer border with Russia. Its NATO membership means that every point along Russia's northwestern frontier is now bordered by a NATO ally. The specific strategic consequence: Russia's Arctic military bases, submarine routes, and nuclear deterrent systems in the Kola Peninsula, the most militarily dense area in the Arctic, are now within NATO's strategic envelope in a way they were not before 2022. Russia has responded by increasing Arctic military activity, conducting more frequent submarine patrols, and reinvesting in Arctic air defense. The American military's Arctic capability gap is the most significant strategic vulnerability in the NATO alliance's northern flank. The United States has no permanent military base north of the Arctic Circle, except Thule Air Base in Greenland. And Thule is a Cold War facility designed for a different strategic era. American military exercises in the Arctic have increased since 2022, including the Arctic Edge exercises and increased naval patrols. But the fundamental capability problem: one heavy icebreaker, aging Arctic airfields, limited cold weather training and equipment, has not been resolved by exercises. The Pentagon's own Arctic strategy documents acknowledge the capability gap. The new icebreaker program, the Polar Security Cutter, has been plagued by construction delays and cost overruns. The first new American heavy icebreaker is not expected to be operational until the late 2020s at the earliest. The Arctic that great powers are competing to control is one of the most extraordinary natural environments on Earth, and one whose ecological reality is the primary casualty of the competition. The Arctic is home to polar bears, the world's largest land predator, whose entire existence depends on sea ice for hunting. Narwhals, the unicorns of the sea, with their extraordinary spiraling tusks, migrate through Arctic waters. Bowhead whales, which can live for over 200 years, sing complex songs beneath the Arctic ice. The walrus herds of the Chukchi Sea. The Arctic fox in its winter white. The snowy owl, the specific extraordinary biodiversity of a world that exists entirely on the edge of the ice, and that is losing that edge faster than any previous geological transition in the Arctic's history. The Northern Lights, Aurora Borealis, are the most celebrated natural phenomenon of the Arctic sky, produced by charged solar particles interacting with the Earth's magnetic field. They are visible from northern Norway, Iceland, Greenland, northern Canada, Alaska, and Russia, the full arc of the Arctic nation's territories. The specific extraordinary visual, curtains of green, purple, and red light moving across the night sky, from faint wisps to full-spectrum displays that fill the entire visible sky. The midnight sun, the Arctic summer's continuous daylight, produces the specific extraordinary quality of polar summer in which biological cycles operate on light rather than dark cycles. The Arctic's human communities, the Inuit, the Sudmai, the Nenets, the Yupik, the Athabascan, have lived with both phenomena for thousands of years, developing cultures specifically adapted to the extreme seasonal variations that define Arctic existence. The approximately 4 million people who live in the Arctic, including approximately 400,000 indigenous people from 40 distinct communities across the 8 Arctic nations, are the most directly affected and least consulted participants in the Arctic competition. The Inuit Circumpolar Council, representing approximately 180 Inuit across Alaska, Canada, Greenland, and Russia, has consistently advocated for Inuit rights to participate in Arctic governance decisions that directly affect their lands, waters, and ways of life. The specific human consequence of the Arctic's transformation, traditional hunting grounds disrupted by ice loss, coastal erosion accelerating as permafrost thaws, traditional knowledge systems whose accumulated understanding of Arctic conditions is becoming less reliable as conditions change faster than observation can track. The Arctic competition is being conducted over indigenous homelands by states that historically have not consulted those homelands' inhabitants. The Arctic Council, the intergovernmental forum of the 8 Arctic states plus 6 indigenous permanent participant organizations, was the primary multilateral body for Arctic cooperation until Russia's 2022 Ukraine invasion caused the 7 other members to suspend cooperation with Russia. The suspension has created the specific diplomatic paradox. The body designed to manage Arctic cooperation has been suspended precisely when Arctic competition is most acute. Without the Arctic Council functioning normally, there is no multilateral forum for resolving the overlapping territorial claims, the shipping route governance disputes, the environmental management questions, or the military confidence building measures that the Arctic's increasing accessibility makes increasingly urgent. The competition is accelerating. The cooperation framework is suspended. The gap between the two is the specific crisis space the Arctic inhabits in 2026. The Arctic's specific contribution to this channel's analytical framework is the demonstration that the next great resource and strategic competition is not being produced by human decisions alone. It is being produced by climate change opening territory that was previously inaccessible, faster than any diplomatic or legal framework can manage the opening. The Berlin Conference comparison is not rhetorical. A territory being open to competition without adequate governance frameworks, divided between competing powers with overlapping claims, and with the indigenous populations who have actually inhabited it being the least consulted. The specific difference: the Arctic has UNCLOS, the Arctic Council, and international norms that the Berlin Conference entirely lacked. The specific similarity: the governance frameworks are inadequate to the speed of the opening. The scramble is happening faster than the law. 40 Russian icebreakers, 1 American, China declaring itself near Arctic, Greenland's 56-0 people navigating 3 powers competing offers, the aurora borealis above a competition for what is under the ice, polar bears walking on ice that is retreating, Inuit hunters whose traditional knowledge is becoming less reliable as the ice changes faster than knowledge can track, the northern sea route reducing Asia-Europe shipping by 40%. With Russia controlling every kilometer of it, the Arctic Council suspended, UNCLOS unratified by the one power most invested in the rules-based order. The scramble is happening. The law is catching up, slowly. History in Progress continues. The next series examines the economic turning points that built the modern world, starting with the metal box that globalized the global economy in 1956. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because the story doesn't end here, it evolves. The ice is melting. The competition is accelerating. The governance frameworks are inadequate to the speed of what is happening. And the next drought year, the next shipping season, the next Chinese investment proposal, and the next Russian submarine patrol are all already underway.